Hmm. How's everybody doing? I see a couple of people participating. I see Robin.
Yes.
I see Preston.
Hey, Sean.
Doing good here.
Awesome. Um, I unfortunately left this thing where I have to admit people, so I'll keep getting distracted by that, I suppose, but bear with me. I probably should have left it open so I don't have to admit people, but that's my bad. I have a little presentation that I first put together on a YouTube video a while ago. It has a couple of updates. I could go through that as a starting point, or we could start with with just people that have questions. I'm laughing. I'm looking at the list of participants, and one of them says "Angry's communicator." I thought that was kind of funny. Um, whoever that is, I love the phone name. Um, but anybody have a specific question they want me to start with, or should I start with kind of the PowerPoint that I had used before and kind of a couple of updates?
Well, I've got a quick question. Can you give any kind of update if anything's changed about the senior tax credit? Because it seems like I've had a lot of questions the last couple of days on that, and I don't have a clue if there's been a glitch in the system or there's something changed about the bills or what.
Yeah, so no changes from a kind of law or policy perspective. I have over the last week or so learned of just a couple of, I'll call them errors, in terms of how things are working. And one of those has to do with the fact we have an assessment system where everybody's uh, value is calculated and all the information about your house is stored. And then we have a separate system for collections. And this year we have a new collection system online. And apparently, there's been a couple of glitches in terms of taking data out of the assessment system and putting it into the new collection system. So I do know of limited, and I say, we do 660,000 tax bills per year because you've got all the parcels for real property and then you got all the personal property accounts as well. And so I've learned of a few, very small number that I've been made aware of where the integration seems to have fallen apart. But m most of the things that I've seen where somebody asks about uh, senior tax credit has usually been people misunderstanding. So, for example, if their tax liability went down in 2025 compared to 24, and they were expecting to see a credit, well, the credit is there to protect you from increases. So, if your tax bill went down, there is no credit that particular year. Let's see here. Angry, Angry's communicator, whoever that is, said, I'm super interested in commercial property taxes that did informal adjustments over the summer and now excluded from the 15% cap. So I can clarify that. And the clarification is really that we believe that everybody's going to be entitled to the cap. If you had a signed stipulation over the summer, my understanding from the county executive is that he wants to have people, if they want to set aside their stipulation and use the cap instead, that he'll have a process. You sign a form, say, I had my stipulation, but I no longer want to enforce it, so I'd rather have the cap. So it's just there's going to be a step. The new county executive's background is as an attorney, so when he sees somebody um, waiving a previously signed agreement, he just wants to have some documentation around that. And Angie, I think, is the same person as Angry's communicator. So, hi, Angie. And let's see, you messaged me on Facebook and gave you parcel numbers on there. Okay. So does that answer your question about commercial, Preston, or was there something more specific? By the way, this is my little holiday cocktail. I don't know if you guys are seeing me on camera.
You covered my question fine, thanks.
Okay. My holiday cocktail, by the way, is alcohol free. It just is making me feel festive because we're in the middle of Christmas decorations right now. So, uh, let's see. Anybody else? I'll just kind of. So, Angie, uh, are you saying you want me to pull up while everybody's here with us your parcel? Or did we already answer your questions that you posted to me on Facebook? Looks like Angie's typing. Uh, oh, she says not necessary. Okay. Anybody else have a specific question about your own account, your own situation, or exceptions, things you've heard or seen online?
I have a question.
Sure.
This is Steve McKenna. So for those of us that, we had our appeal denied for 2023 and 2024. What is our next steps that we should be doing? Or is this now just more of a sit and wait and see how it all shakes out kind of thing?
Yeah, well, so I can tell you what's going to happen, but we're not going to actually take action on, and I assume you're talking about a residential partial that you appealed coming out of the 23 assessment.
Yes, sir. Yep.
So in August of 24, the State Tax Commission ordered Jackson County to roll all 2023 residential assessments that received more than a 15% increase. The State Tax Commission ordered all of those to be rolled back to a 15% max increase. The previous administration appealed that in the court system and lost, and they were continuing the appeal and probably were going to go all the way to the Missouri Supreme Court while we all waited. The new administration has come in and said they will enforce that state tax commission order. So there's not really anything you have to do, but we're not going to enforce that order until 2026. The reason for that is that, you got a new guy comes in, he's in the job for a few weeks. The most urgent crisis was the commercial assessments in 2025, which had gone haywire. So the energy was really put toward correcting commercial assessments in 2025, knowing that whatever happened in 23 and 24 wouldn't have a lot of impact on most people's bills in 25 for residential. So yeah, come early next year, there will be a lot more specifics about how that rollout's going to look. But the bottom line is your 23 and 24 assessed value will be rolled back to no more than a 15% increase. And then your 23 and your 2024 tax bills will be recalculated. And if that resulted in a reduction of tax, then the amount that you overpaid will be listed as a credit, and then those credits will be applied one third each to 2026, 2027, and 2028. So that'll mean that you'll pay less in taxes for 3 years, kind of to make up for the fact that you overpaid in 23 and 24. Does that make sense? And
Yep.
One of these slides kind of goes through it a little bit. Let's see. Well, no, it doesn't. It doesn't really go through the rollback because when I did this deck, we didn't know the rollback was going to happen yet. I was still fighting with the county exec. So yeah, nothing to do at the moment. And there will be kind of a similar situation for some people who appealed in 23 and 24. They might have signed a stipulation similar to what I mentioned about commercial. And so for those folks, we may have them sign a form that says they no longer desire to have the stipulation enforced, and they want to go with the 15% cap. But the details on residential still being worked out. My hope is we don't do that because it's about 30,000 people. And one thing I've learned in this role, helping tons of people, is that when you have tens of thousands of anything, you create errors. So I'm hoping we can just make those residential rollbacks a math exercise and not have a lot of paperwork, but we'll see. Other
Fair
questions about
enough.
that, Steve?
One other question. Yeah, no, you did great. Thank you for the explanation. Um, is there an expectation that we'll have continued 15% increases? Is that going to become normal, if you
No,
will?
no. So the 15% is in state law that's the most anybody's bill can go up on residential unless a full inspection is done. So that's why
Mhm.
it's happened here is because in 23 we basically determined that the inspections weren't done in accordance with the law, at least not 100% of them, and we couldn't really determine which ones were and which ones weren't. So that's why the
Mhm.
STC issued that order. Your assessment is really supposed to be based on the value of your property as of January 1st of each odd numbered year. And if they're done accurately, it really just depends on what the real estate market does. And if the real estate market really inflates things, then we either have to gradually bring people up at 14% increases, or we have to properly inspect them. In my view, the inspections should be reserved for like those extreme situations, like people who are drastically undervalued for some reason, like some sort of error happened, right? And we
Mhm.
want to correct those. Um, for anybody else, and normally, I think the historic norm. There's probably some real estate agents or investors on the phone that can correct me, but I think an average of a 4% annual increase or 3.5 is kind of the historic norm for real estate. Um, between the COVID thing, which caused for some strange reason real estate to go crazy, and then we don't talk about this much, but in 2021, the county executive sort of left, uh, as a matter of policy, kind of left people's assessed values unchanged. So what you saw in 23 was really the equivalent of like 4 years worth of catch up, and maybe even more than that for some people whose values were just, accidentally too low already. And the 21, the fact that they didn't really try to adjust people's values to proper level in 2021, some people have said is because he was, standing for re-election in 2022. Other people, and the official reason they gave for not really doing a proper assessment in 2021 was that because of COVID, they couldn't have proper inspections done. They didn't want to risk going into people's homes. They didn't want to have a bunch of people coming in to do appeals. So they blamed COVID. Other people have said that the real reason, because by 21 it was, COVID was for most people less of a concern. But people have said it was either politics or COVID or a combination of both. But bottom line is, I think we should expect historic increases that are more like what we see over history, 2 or 3%. Some people are thinking that the real estate market is in a bit of a bubble right now. In 2008, when the bubble burst, values did go down, maybe not as much as what it seemed like in the market, but assessed values did go down in 2008 when the real estate market kind of went backwards. So that's what should happen.
Thank you.
No problem. How you doing, Robin? I see you on camera. Am I
I'm,
on camera, by the way, guys? Like I have my camera on, but I don't see my face.
yes, you are.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Um, you have any questions, Robin?
I was mainly in to listen because I am trying to do a wait and see, but when they do this assessed value, which I question how they did it, because, for example, on my block, my assessment went up over 47%. One other house came close to mine, and theirs came up like 21%. Some of them went down, some of them went up. And by mine is by no means the nicest house on the block, and
Yeah.
it's not the trashiest one either. I do kind of have a nice house, but what steps can we take to make sure that they really truly do accurate assessed values? Because
Yeah.
I really got the shaft on this one. I mean, and I did negotiate my down. I didn't get down to 15%, but I got it down quite a bit.
Yeah. So, probably the most important thing that we can do in the I'll say in the next year, is to elect a county executive who is going to follow the law, make sure that the processes are followed properly, and will appoint an assessor who does that. I know Preston's announced he's running for county assessor, so that'll first be an elected position in 2028. So we voted this past November, just a few weeks ago, to change our county charter. And so now our charter says that we will elect our future assessors, but in the state of Missouri, we're only allowed to elect assessors in the same elections as we elect presidents of the United States. So the next time we do that will be 2028. So in the meantime, we need to, Mr. Lavoda will soon, hopefully, appoint an assessor. And then in 2026, we'll elect a new county executive, and hopefully that person will keep the assessor on if they're doing a good job, or will appoint an assessor who does a good job, follows the law, weighs the economic impact. So there's the assessor's job's kind of weird, right? You're supposed to say what everybody's property's worth. If you don't get close, then you can get in trouble with the state tax commission. But let's just say hypothetically, everybody's values went through the roof. Probably the right thing to do then as an assessor is to take a little heat from the state tax commission while gradually increasing people. What really went wrong in 23 and with 25 with commercial, in my opinion, is that we introduced just too much change too fast. And the law doesn't allow an assessor to just say, well, that's too painful for people, so I'm going to do it a little bit at a time. It doesn't explicitly allow it, but it happens often. And as long as you're moving in the right direction, the state tax commission tends to give people quite a bit of latitude to do that. So aside from those things, there's some things at the state level that I think need to be changed. So I'm going to be doing some organizing around getting people to reach out to their state representatives and state senators. So I'll give you one example. According to state law, all appeals are supposed to be resolved by the 4th August or 4th Monday in August. So last year it would have been like August 26th or something. Obviously, 2023 appeals were being heard 2 years later. The problem with that state law is it doesn't say what happens if the Board of Equalization fails to hear everybody's appeal in time. And I think, okay, add a provision to the state law that says if all appeals haven't been heard, then the homeowner prevails and their value can't go up by more than some reasonable percentage, right? There's just no teeth in the laws that are supposed to be there to protect individual taxpayers. That if the county had followed the law as it exists today, we wouldn't be in this mess, right? But then the law is written with no consequences, so it's like a bunch of guidelines and hoping that people just do the right thing. You just have to add consequences if the law doesn't get followed in a lot of different places. So advocating at the state level, I think, is our next step to help make sure that this gets better.
Another question to kind of follow up on the county executive roles. Once we knew they were in violation of the state law and state tax commission said, yes, they were, but they appealed it and appealed that. Is there anything the county legislature can do to change that, to consider? Because to me, that's throwing away,
Yeah.
bad money,
Yeah. So there's a couple of
to
things.
stop that, if it was a legitimate lawsuit, I may not like it, but I could understand it. But that just
Yeah.
is frustrating because that's not how I wanted my taxpayer money spent.
And so the legislature actually passed a resolution indicating that we didn't want it appealed, that we didn't want it, we just wanted to follow the state tax commission order. We don't have a lot of teeth to enforce things like that. So one thing that I do a lot of research, St. Charles County over on the east side of the state, their county legislature has the authority to fix assessments. Right now, that authority resides with our county executive. And since the county executive appoints the assessor and appoints the BOE, then to have him also be the only one, or her in the future, to have that county executive be the only person who can correct problems seems like we missed something. So one option would be to change our charter so that that authority would reside with the legislature. Um, the other thing is that our county councilor can initiate lawsuits. The only time he has to get our permission is if we're named as a party to the lawsuit. So in the case of the resolution we passed, he just said, fine, I won't list the county legislature as a party to the lawsuit. And he went off and did the appeal that the county executive told him to. So there's some reforms that could help us if this ever happens again. And then, of course, the major thing is to just elect good people, so that this doesn't happen. Out of 116 counties or 118 counties in Missouri, this just doesn't happen anywhere but here. So we just really have to. I hope this will cause a high degree of voter engagement, and people will really dig into whether or not their county executive candidates, future assessor candidates, future legislative candidates know this part of the county's duties and will do the right thing. So other suggestions, by the way, I'm a crowdsource guy. So if anybody on the phone or via email wants to share other ideas with me on how to prevent this from ever happening again, I'm all ears. So, but those are my suggestions off the top of my head. Hi, Diana. We haven't talked in a minute.
Hey there. Can you hear me?
I can.
I'm in the airport, so it might get noisy if they start announcing. I appreciate you having this session. I wasn't sure my connection would allow it, but it is.
Yeah.
So,
That's what I had to change
Sean,
yesterday. I was at a conference and the hotel Wi-Fi was so bad I couldn't do a Zoom. So,
so Sean, ever since my own personal journey with this property tax situation began, is only 2025. So great, you know, condolences, I guess, to people who've been dealing with it for much longer than I have.
yeah.
But in all the research that I did, every single path is blocked for the taxpayer as far as any sort of remedy other than, paying the taxes, paying it under dispute, waiting for your time to get in front of the BOE, and then waiting to get your time in front of the STC.
Yeah.
It's like, and I hear and I feel for the taxpayers that have had to pay, what they felt were disputed taxes for years, and then maybe or maybe they won't eventually get a refund or a credit
Right.
that maybe or maybe not will give them interest for the money that they've donated to the county. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think there's more than one aspect of this that needs to be addressed. For example, if someone has appealed and they can't get their appeal heard by the date, I love the idea that, it's decided in the taxpayer's favor. But maybe there's also cases where you pay the undisputed amount,
Right.
right? And then the disputed amount is not paid until there's a resolution.
Yeah. I think that's reasonable. So right now there's this concept of paying under protest. In order to pay under protest, you still have to pay the full amount. But then those funds are sequestered, so they don't get distributed to the cities and school districts. So I really encourage people to pay under protest. What I will tell you is that the rules to do that are a bit onerous, and I don't want to speak ill of anybody, but I will tell you that several times I brought up, like, why does there have to be a lawsuit filed when somebody pays under protest? And our county counselor was like, oh yeah, that's the rule. I started digging into that myself just recently, and I feel like it's a little less clear at the state statute level. So I may look at whether we as a county can simplify paying under protest, and maybe even the other thing the county counselor told me is that penalties and interest were state mandated, the money goes to the cities and schools, so we're not allowed to waive penalties and interest. And there again, actually talking to the state tax commission at the conference that I was at the hotel with bad Wi-Fi yesterday, um, it feels like maybe as a charter county, we might have a little bit of latitude there. So we have a county counselor. He provides advice to the legislature, but unfortunately, I'm finding that in order for me to get comfortable with exactly how far we can take some of this, I think I'm going to have to research it myself, and maybe the legislature is going to have to get some independent counsel to advise us. But I would be all about allowing people to pay under protest, so all of their money is sequestered without a lawsuit, and that in order to pay under protest, if they have an open appeal, that they only have to pay, as you said, the undisputed amount. That seems like a great thing to do, and honestly, it incentivizes the county and county personnel and school districts to want those disputes settled sooner. Because if a school district um, isn't getting their money because it's sequestered in a protest, um, you know, they're not happy about that either. And the more people we get on our side through those kinds of actions, I think the more likely it is that we get some real meaningful structural reform. So I
Well,
think that's a great idea.
I would really be interested in seeing or hearing about. I mean, people, according to what I read, I mean, paying under protest is pretty simple. You just write it on the check, pay it under protest, right?
Yep. Nope.
And it's supposed to be.
That does not create a protest payment. There is an
Well,
entire little section in the county collections website that describes how you have to do it. There's a form you have to fill out, and you have to be within a certain period of time, you have to be a party to a lawsuit against the county.
yeah, I did catch the party to the lawsuit, which seems like that would pretty much squelch the majority of.
Yeah,
the
there's been a gal
effective-
who Shirley DeJanes is an attorney, and since 2019 she has voluntarily filed those lawsuits on behalf of um, any county taxpayer that wanted to pay under protest. And this year, she said it had just gotten to be too much, and so we don't have anybody doing that. And honestly, I don't know why there's a requirement. So I'm going to push hard on that as a reform that I hope we can take care of at the county level to get rid of that requirement.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, and I don't know how I've spent hundreds of hours literally looking at property tax records, not just for myself, but for others, to try to
Yeah,
understand them, like understand by comparison and omission,
yeah,
and I can, in my opinion, after only spending hundreds of hours on this, I'll say that everybody's property tax records are pretty crappy in terms of, is there enough information in there that one could reasonably reproduce that value using, like Swift Estimator, for example,
yeah,
And the answer is no. I mean, on mine, I did not all values were there. And so I had to do some iterations and I could eventually reproduce. But
yeah,
for the majority of other records I looked at, I mean, the overrides are the perfect example. There's absolutely no foundation of fact that one could represent to say this is how the value was calculated.
right.
And then other ones, they're not so obvious with the override, but still, you
Yeah.
cannot reproduce them by the facts that are presented.
Yeah.
So I think that's a fundamental aspect of the valuation that needs to change.
So I agree with you. I'll tell you the couple of things. The first step that we took toward that was that portal that you got all that information off of. This is the first year that portal was available to the public. That was done by a piece of legislation that I sponsored and required for the assessor to publish that data. And so we're still learning. The other thing I had done, and we retracted this piece of legislation, we passed. So for those who don't know, there are 3 permanent members of the BOE, and then there's a series of reps from each city and school district who also supplement them. Those folks that are the 3 permanent members were working 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50 hours a week, and their salary is set based on something that's in the county code of ordinances. And when they were really busy, they were making less than minimum wage. And then other months that they're not busy, if all they do is have a regular monthly meeting and there's no appeals left outstanding, they make like $1,500 a month. So we had passed legislation that restructured their pay so that it was based on how busy they were. And I should say, in the existing pay structure, the way it was and still is technically, if they only got a higher amount of pay, which again didn't even amount to minimum wage anymore, they only got that higher amount during July and August, which is when all these appeals are supposed to be heard. So their compensation is set based on an artifact of a generation ago. So we had offered to adjust that. The county executive asked me to repeal that piece of legislation temporarily, which I did, and then we'll revisit it. But the other thing I had inserted was evidentiary standards. And one of the things that's been controversial is that the assessor will assess your property and then frequently will, after you appeal, go out and gather up evidence to justify the assessed value that they had. What I did in that piece of legislation was created a requirement that within 10 days after a taxpayer files an appeal, the assessment department must have all their evidence in the system ready for the appeal. Now, that doesn't mean their appeals are going to be heard in 10 days. What it means is the assessor has to pretty much have all the data that they want to rely on when they do the assessment. I mean, technically, I give them 10 days, but the bottom line is the notion was this would force them to be ready to defend their assessments at any moment. So we'll keep that provision in when we figure out their compensation again. And I think that will help. The other thing it'll help is that I was seeing the BOE ask the assessment department, well, do you have evidence of an inspection? Do you have evidence that there's a basement? And they would go off to another system while the taxpayer's on the phone in the middle of their appeal and then provide evidence to the BOE. Well, that's extremely unfair because it means the people who appealed didn't have the opportunity to refute that evidence, right? So I want all the evidence to have to be there so a taxpayer can look at all the evidence the assessment department's going to present and refute any of the information that's inaccurate. But I totally agree with you, Diane. We need to be as transparent in this as possible, and the accuracy of the data that we have definitely needs to be improved. For years, decades, the old assessment system that we had was so old that information wasn't even being maintained. All they were really adjusting was people's values. So we're coming from a culture that existed that way, and we need to get to the point where all the information that builds up to what somebody's assessed value is readily available in the system and can be presented to the taxpayer through that portal. So I totally agree with you on that. I started to hear some background noise with Diana, so I'm going to move on. I see in the chat, Roy Harriman has a question. Could I clarify the previous statement regarding the potential relief for homeowner who signed a revised value? I signed a 7% reduction, but the net valuation increase was still about 100%. I don't know if this was a stipulation agreement. I did not appeal to the BOE. Is there any potential relief since I signed this? So the answer is yes, Roy. And so I'm assuming this is it says homeowner. So this is probably 23, 24 value. And the intent is that, and anything you signed, it was likely a stipulation. That's the only document really that they use. And the intent is, yes, you'll still be entitled to change that 100% increase to a 15% increase retroactively. We'll announce the exact process for getting that done in 2026. My hope is within the first couple of months of 26, but don't hold me to that. And then once you get rid of that stipulation, we change you to a 15% increase compared to 22. That's where you'll end up with a credit that'll help you pay for your 26, 27, and 28 tax bills. And chime in. I can take you off mute if you want, Roy. if you want to ask any follow-up questions, but I hope that explanation helped. Let's see. A couple of questions. Let's see. I just had to chime in. Ryan, Roy. Okay, Roy's satisfied. So I'll go to the next question in chat. Angry's communicator. I think the real name on this person is Angie, if I remember correctly. Had a couple of follow-up questions, make sure I understood the commercial answer correctly. We're on the road and my kids are loud. It's that season, right? There will be a process to sign something that sets aside your previous agreement to take the 15% cap. That's correct. When would that happen? My hope was we might have seen that announced this week. There you go. There's my dog. Sorry for the background noise. If it doesn't happen this week, I expect it to happen very early in December. Will they contact us or do we need to start that process? I suspect that the best answer is to take ownership of you starting that process once it's announced in the news. I also will put it out via my newsletter. If you're not receiving the newsletter, shoot an email to my county address and we'll get you on the email list. And the reason I say that is I may be able to get everybody's contact information and do a mass mailing and text, but I think it's best if you as the taxpayer don't assume that our communication is going to be perfect. So just keep an eye on the news. With taxes due next month and the slowness of things, if this happens after we have to pay 25, will it be a credit? No. If you overpay in 25 and then we redo things, first off, in talking to the State Tax Commission yesterday, it was just a hallway conversation, so don't take this to the bank, but they said in the past, when bills couldn't be produced correctly due to errors or issues, other jurisdictions have been able to extend the payment deadline. So I'm going to talk to the county executive either later this week or if I can't, then next week about whether or not we want to do that for commercial assessments. So hopefully you won't pay a bill that's incorrect. But if you have to, if we can't get the deadline adjusted for commercial assessments this year, if you have to pay it on time, I suggest paying it on time, but I expect that you would get your money back in fairly short order after we get things corrected. And I've been really cautious about, being optimistic for things getting fixed. But on that one, I feel like we should be able to fix that on a fairly timely basis, like within a month or two. Let's see. Preston says, I didn't know about the data portal and you getting that done. Hats off. Thanks, Preston. The data portal really did help. And it's funny because at first they said that wasn't possible. And it's not perfect, but it's headed in the right direction at least. How about informal commercial appeals that had other errors that were corrected? My property is mixed use, but was only labeled commercial. They corrected that. So the commercial portion should be subject to a 15% cap if you signed a stipulation that had a value and they corrected the classification. That's a new question for me. And I will say that our process of waiving that stipulation needs to allow for situations like yours, Ryan. That's just not one that we had contemplated. That's part of the value of me doing these kinds of things is that I hear about scenarios that I hadn't thought about before, and that allows us to make adjustments to our policy. So thanks for bringing that up. And I see or have seen Ashley on. Ashley helped me remember that. And by the way, Ashley's probably in the car because she's supposed to be walking into my house in about 2 minutes. And we're supposed to be in an event after a little while. So Ryan, yours still went up 200%. So yeah, the correction down to a 15% increase is going to really help you. I wish it had come sooner, but the recall process took a little longer than all of us would have liked. So by the way, I've talked about the portal, and I've talked about, well, two things that are relatively new, and I'm going to display them on my screen. And then we're going to put the links in the chat, and they're in this PowerPoint that I have. The first one, and I need to move some things out of my way here. So this is the portal that we've been talking about. And I will copy and paste, hopefully, the link. into the chat. So what this allows you to do, and a lot of people have started to learn about this, if you click on property records and real property, you agree to something the county has said, and by the way, I have people that have expressed concern about that. I'm aware of that. Nobody should be waiving their rights because they're using the portal. So I'm just going to type my own name in. One thing is, I think the owner on this one, if you do last name, first name, no comma, no spaces, I think is how this one works. And I mentioned that because on the bill lookup, I'm going to show you in a moment, it works a little bit differently. So there's me. There's property that I own. There's my house. We'll just click on that for giggles. And this gives you a series of things. Obviously the address, the neighborhood name, all that stuff. Gives you the historic values. I've got stuff in my way, but over here you can see your property record card. That's sort of the details behind how your value was determined in the current year. Documents contains your assessment notice that you received. I'm sure there's other stuff here, but my point is not to drain all the information that might be on the portal, just to show you that the portal exists. This is what we've been talking about. The link is there in the chat. People can get to it. And by the way, they said my house is in average condition. I think my house is in great condition, but don't tell them that because my assessment will go up. Let's see here. I've got too many things going on, but I'm going to flip over to the other thing, which is, so we used to have a system called Ascend where you could look up your bill. This is the new version of Ascend, and there is some things about it that I think are pretty kludgy in terms of how you look yourself up. But the key here is you click on search options and that you can. So first thing that I don't like about this is that it doesn't let you search on parcel number. The PIN search is the thing that comes on your property record card. Address search, you can play with, but just for giggles, I'll put my first and last name in here. And you can see what it does is it creates this little query up here. And then I have to, and I can't see it because you have to click on the actual search button. So it's just weird that you go one place, put in the criteria, then it moves it to another place and you got to use that little button. So most search engines, if you type in your name and address or name and hit enter, it just works, right? And it looks like it didn't just capture Sean's. So I will just say, then you get your parcel number over here and you can view your account. We'll look at, well, I wish I could look at my own because then I know I'm not disclosing anything somebody doesn't want me to disclose because it's my own. Oh, I see the problem. I typed my last name in twice. See, I am a human. I make errors sometimes. Let's see. Here's one of my tax bills. So this is, now you guys get to see what cars I drive. This is personal property. Did Ashley come in? Is that okay? So cars that I own, what they're worth, what the assessed value is on those. Down here, we can see what my tax bill is. You can view a detailed statement. One thing, the only place that I've seen the senior tax credit show up is in this exemptions area. So this is not a residential bill and I'm not a senior yet, so I'm not entitled to that. But I have seen the amount of the senior credit appear right here under 2025 and it'll say senior tax credit. I've seen that on a couple of them. That's the only place I've seen it. Can do a view detailed statement, then you see, how much you've paid in, whoops. Where'd my detailed statement. You can see how much money's going to the school district versus the county versus the state or the cities, et cetera. And then you can see the tax rates and how much is going to each district. What this doesn't do, and I don't have an answer for people yet. Somebody asked me the other day, how do they see per vehicle, how much they're paying? I don't have an answer for that other than to calculate it yourself. And I think some people need that because they might have one vehicle that's business and they need to deduct that on that portion of their taxes. And then they might have other vehicles that are personal. So don't have an answer for that at the moment. Let's see here. What other questions? I've put a couple things in chat for you guys. Ashley has the link to sign up for the newsletter if you're interested. Um, what else? I guess. While I still have a little bit of time, and I think I posted, I was going to do an hour and then I was going to take a break and then I was going to come back in and do another hour. So we got about 10 more minutes before we take a break and then I get over this event that I'm supposed to be at. Other
John,
thoughts, questions? Yeah.
quick question, and I'm pretty sure I follow you on this. My name is Steve, and we own a small business in the West Bottoms. I spoke to Ashley a week or two ago. My wife and I went to the assessor and met with them over off of Washington.
Yep.
Did our due diligence, we had a 370% increase on our building. We felt like that we kind of negotiated out of duress. Felt like the guy, although he was, this is probably going to be the best deal you're going to get. So, speaking to other people down here, they did the same thing. We thought we were being proactive. And anyway, long story short, if I understand you correctly, um, is there going to be an opportunity for us to pay with just a 15% cap, or are we going to have to pay the full amount and do it under protest?
Yeah. So, my hope is that we can get your bills corrected before they're due. I may even be able to legislatively, I just learned this yesterday, I may be able to legislatively delay the deadline by which commercial property taxes are due this year, for people that are in situations like yours. So I'm going to work on that. I just learned that that was a possible option yesterday. Um, one thing, so I'm kind of parsing out your question. There were concerns that anybody who signed a stipulation wouldn't be eligible for the cap. Now, the county executive has come out and said clearly that's not his intention. He just is asking for people who signed a stipulation like yourself that there be a process where you kind of waive that stipulation because there's something in writing that says two parties agreed to this. He just wants there to be something else in writing with your signature on it that says, yeah, that wasn't a good deal for us. We would rather go with the cap, right? That process, the exact forms that are like, I've seen a draft of the form, but it wasn't ready to release to the public yet. So it's imminently going to be released to the public to explain that process for commercial property owners this year. As we get closer and closer to December 31st, it's possible you might need to pay under protest. My hope is that I can do legislation just here locally and quickly that will extend the deadline so you don't have to pay and then wait for a refund. Does that answer both your questions? Kind of, I know it's a
I
nitpicky
believe
answer.
so. And I always hesitate to pay under protest because, as you know, when you're dealing with the state at any level, as an example, my wife sometimes, if she's never late on paying Missouri or Kansas taxes, but has been occasionally once or twice in 30 years. But if we overpay, it takes 3 or 4 months to get our money back. But if we underpay, they hit us right away. So it's a very one-sided track, and we obviously want to try to eliminate paying under protest if at all possible.
Yeah, and I want to do that for you as well. I really think that my colleagues and we had been told for 2 years that there was nothing we could do about tax deadlines as far as the payment deadlines by our county attorneys. Well, now I find out that maybe we can. So I got to figure that out quick. And I wish I had a firmer answer for you right now, but I'm just trying to give you the truth, even if it isn't perfect yet. So
Well, I sure appreciate the information and the help that your office has given us, including Ashley.
yep, she's a rock star. I'm seeing her now. Hi, Ashley. So I was gonna wrap this up in about 10 minutes. Okay. Um, let's see. We had a couple other people join. By the way, I've recorded this, guys, and we'll post the recording since we have an event tonight. We'll post the recording. Um, late tonight or early tomorrow so people can get it. We'll do that on the Facebook page and we'll, I don't have a campaign page right now. I'll have to figure out another website where I can post it and make it generally available. Probably YouTube. I do have a YouTube channel. So, um, let's see. I think Martha might have joined just recently, so I'll say Martha, Helena. I think you also might have joined recently. Any questions that you guys have specifically? Not hearing anything in anybody. So just maybe we can wrap a little early. Oh, now I hear somebody.
This is Helena. I have a question.
Yeah.
My property, I mean, I don't have any issues with needing a refund or anything, but my property was under a tax abatement because we used a city grant for some
Okay.
renovations, or actually some repairs, not renovations. But they gave us an abatement for 10 years, which was
Okay.
lovely, of course. What my question is, I have the senior tax credit approved. Will it use the abatement figure because that's what I've been paying, or will it go to the whatever the 24 assessment figure is when the abatement comes out?
Yeah, my assumption is it would go to the 24 calculated tax. I think abatements are handled somewhat similar to the senior tax credit. It replaces you having to pay, but it doesn't reduce your value or your actual calculated tax. That's an area that I'm not sure.
It's confusing because some of the stuff that's been put out says that whatever you're paying when your senior tax credit goes into effect, it will be what you always pay that amount.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Um,
then how does that affect somebody that already has an abatement?
yeah. Eh, Can you email me the details of your parcel and the abatement and I'll research it a little bit. I honestly don't think that that has been contemplated by anybody. This is the first year that people are seeing senior tax credits on their bill. And I was giving you my best guess answer, but abatements are something that I haven't had a lot of experience with, and nobody's asked me this question, and I haven't seen any like guidance from the State Tax Commission or the organization that I was at the meeting with is the Missouri Association of Counties. They put out advisory opinions about how the senior tax credit thing was going to work. Um, the urban counties that do abatements mainly, I haven't seen any guidance on it. So I really need to research that one before I give you a real answer.
Yeah,
But
that would be great. I know a number of my neighbors are affected by this too, so they would like to know.
yeah, no, it's a great question. And um, some of I'll give you guys another example. We talk policy wise, and because the news picks up a story and they just want to follow a snippet. So we say that when you have the senior tax credit, you're never going to pay more than whatever amount you're frozen at. There's even a part of that that's a little bit untrue. So the tiny little portion of your tax bill, let me see if it's on this screen that I have, that is the um, it's the Missouri blind pension. This
Mhm.
tiny little bit, which on this person's bill is $28, that one portion technically doesn't get frozen. So out of a whatever this is, $7,000 bill, 28% of it will continue to follow whatever the assessed value increase is, or not 28%, $28. So that's less than 1%. But there's certain little details like that that when we talk in generalities about what the senior tax credit does, we don't necessarily explain every single time. But what the state law passed that gave us the ability to grant the senior tax credit thing, they kept their own portion. This is the only portion of your property tax bill that's paid to the state, and we can't freeze that part under the state law. So, and it's a tiny little amount compared to the total bills, so most people won't even notice, but I try to be as just forthright and complete as I can. But if I always explained everything, then people get bored and quit listening to me.
Thanks.
No problem. And do email me, and I'll look into the abatement question because that's a great question that's going to apply to a lot of people. So,
Yeah, thank you. I'll do that.
Thanks. What else? Anybody else have a good one? Hopefully this was helpful for you guys. Oh, Nola, I see you on here, but and like I said, I have recorded the whole thing. We'll post the whole thing. I might grab a couple of snippets out that explain specific questions because a lot of people don't want to watch a full 1 hour video to get one little question answered. But we'll get all that posted to YouTube and up on Facebook just as quick as we can. But it won't be probably tonight. If it's tonight, it'll be very, very late. I'm just going to pause and see if anybody else wants to chime in before we wrap up for a little bit.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Steve. And let those other folks I know in particular, your area of commercial properties got just smacked hard. Let them know that things are looking up. I really appreciate everybody attending. I appreciate everybody's questions. I appreciate everybody's patience. This has been a long, long journey to try to get things fixed. The recall, if it had happened a year ago, this would all be history now. Unfortunately, that process was just very time consuming. And of course, here we are. I think everybody is doing their best. By the way, I had some feedback, gentleman that owns 50 or 60 rental properties, and every year he's having to appeal them. And he said, I had some errors in my billing. And he said, last year and the year before, try to work with people and they were just not helpful at the county. They'd even say, oh, it's a mistake, but there's nothing I can do to help you. And he said, just in the last few weeks, as he's contacted people, he's seen a notable difference in people's demeanor. It's almost like we had good people all along and they wanted to help, but their senior management was maybe giving them direction to not be helpful, to try to maximize revenue. I don't know what all was happening, but I just know that when I hear feedback that people's actual experience working with county personnel has improved it's only been 6 weeks, I think, since Phil was appointed. That's really good news, and it's a positive that we're headed the right direction. So very good.
Hey, Sean, we really appreciate all your hard work, and I can't imagine how we would have gotten through this if you had not been in that position. So thank you.
I appreciate you saying that. I just saw a question from Julie about Tyler Technologies. I think until we have a new assessor appointed, that we probably shouldn't talk about what we do about Tyler Technologies, just because we need somebody that is needing to be a fresh face with some amount of expertise in that position, dig into what the system is and isn't capable of and whether or not it can meet our needs. My background, for those who don't know, I spent 25 years in the software business. I don't know if the problems were Tyler's software or the management. My leaning is toward the idea that it was mostly a management problem. But I only had limited access to all the details that I'd need in order to really make that determination. I've helped correct major software problems, and a lot of times the problem at the end of the day didn't turn out to be the software. It was the guidance and the management of the people that were trying to use the software. So I'm trying to stay open-minded about Tyler for the moment.
They do seem to have kind of a history that follows them, though. I've Googled them just briefly.
Oh yeah.
And they have a history of the same kind of mess wherever they work. So, but I understand what you're talking about, though, too. So
yeah. Yeah. So that one's just a wait and see for me. I'd love to just be able to blame the software company, but I just don't. The information I have would suggest that they had some service problems, meaning the way they implemented the software here might have been a problem, but I don't know that means the software itself was to blame. So Oi, hopefully this was helpful for people, and I'll sign back on again. I'll be in a different situation at that point, but I'll sign back on again about 5:30 or 6 to see if other people join and there's more questions. And in the meantime, I am going to leave this open, and I'm going to turn the recording off, but that way, when people join, they'll know that I'm coming back on a little later. So
Okay, thank you, Sean.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
help.